Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So for people who are on Zoom, hi, thank you for being here. We are waiting for our guest Nizar Yaiche, who got lost. And so we are just having a quick overview. Things happen. I mean, we are in real life. So we are just going through the historical overview of the last decades. And thanks again for you on Zoom and you here in the room for being here. Sorry for making it late. So yeah, the first 10 years of Tunisia of Ben Ali's era were not like a rosy picture. The structure of the economy was not like a free market economy, and there is a part of his family that dominated the economy. But anyway, the structures worsened but didn't change that much. 2008 is a very important moment. Here you can see a screenshot from a clandestine TV, which is Fmr Tunisian, that was prohibited under Ben Ali, that covered the demonstration in the mining region. And then, thank you. Good news.
Hi, sorry.
Happy to have you.
Sorry, I made it finally.
Hooray!
Marhaba, thank you for being here. Was just going through a quick historical overview of what's going on in Tunisia since the independence, with the official dates and the less official dates. But now, since you're here, I have to thank you, Professor Nathalie Tocci, for accepting to be our guest. Please have a seat.
Do you want to finish your story here?
I can wrap it up very fast. As you want.
Wrap it up.
Yeah. So basically what people say is that 2008, what scholars have observed is that there is no like a virgin moment, a revolutionary moment that comes out of the blue, like by surprise. No, 2011 has its roots, and its roots come from all the signs of confronting the power, whether it was Bourguiba's power. I mean, even if Bourguiba has been the man of the state, he has been challenged by the unions, by the bourgeoisie, by the aristocracy, and by even by his own party and his own ministers. So fast forward to 2011. What happened in 2011 has also affected our minds a lot as Tunisians. Again, I insist that this is a point in a continuity, and this is not like just before and after 2011. And what remained the same is basically the judiciary, the security services, the economic structures. So basically that makes a lot for a country that went through a revolution. So that's why some scholars still debate on whether it was an uprising, a revolution, intifada. And this debate, you can still find it today, because even the president current president is giving a different narrative on what happened during the last 10 years. So what you can see here are 2014 and 2019, which are the two general elections that happened in 2011. We had the Assemblée Constituante, which wrote the constitution. And then we had two general elections, 2014 and 2019. And let me say that a democracy is not defined only by regularity of elections or by elections, even if they are free, even if they are just approved by international observers. And today, so I will finish by the point I started with, we are in a kind of blurry situation where it's as if we had an opportunity that we missed, but the opportunity is still there, not only on a political, but also on an economical level. And Mr. Nizar Yaiche, again, thank you for being here, was a finance minister at a tipping point in Tunisia. It was a few months after the elections of 2019. It was the first government after these general elections. Why his government is very important? Because first, you had the confidence vote in the parliament like in February 27 of 2020. And the lockdown of COVID started March 16th, like 2 weeks later. And then you entered like in a crisis. And that's where I can smoothly make a transition to our today's topic, which is if only to share, which is leadership in times of crisis. So what you have been in power, you and your government and the Fmr government, in a period where, like, we didn't know that COVID will stay for 1 month or for 3 years or 10 years. And I don't want to take too much time, your precious time, and thank you again for being here. Thank you all for being here. I will smoothly leave the chair to both of you. And again, thank you for accepting the invitation of the Tunisia caucus. And it's really, really a great pleasure to have you all here. And it will not only be about, I think, Tunisia, but also about more generally, I think your backgrounds and the discussion that we're going to have will be thrilling and very interesting. And again, I will leave you with Professor Nathalie Tocci, who makes me the pleasure to be my teacher and professor, but also will moderate this debate. So please, Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Mohammed, and thanks to the Tunisia caucus for organizing this wonderful opportunity for this exchange with Nizar Yaiche. And in fact, looking at his background, there are really sort of two elements which are, I think, of particular interest for this talk this evening. I mean, the first is what we've been listening to up until now. So obviously there is the Tunisia story, which really kind of provides a sort of real life empirical rooting to what it means when we talk about leadership, and when we talk about leadership, not only in times of change, which is in a sense a sort of general proposition, but in times of very tumultuous change, as Tunisia has been living through over, particularly over the last decade. And then on top of this, there is a second element. So obviously, sort of, Nizar's experience as Minister of Finance in this very critical moment, and then sort of coupled to this, also Nizar's experience today as a partner of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and in particular as a partner leading and heading their work on digital and what digital leadership and governance actually mean. So sort of, bringing these two themes together, I think it would be sort of particularly interesting, firstly to sort of, reflect a little bit about sort of, beginning with the Tunisia angle of the story. Of course, this is a country which, in a sense, was the first domino of what used to be called the Arab Spring. And then, in fact, the only spring left was actually in Tunisia. So it was, in a sense, not only the first domino to go, but then it was also, and this is a question mark which relates to the point that Mohammed was making, is it the last to go, question mark? Having gone through obviously the experiences that we have in of course, Egypt and of course Libya and Syria, but Egypt is probably the parallel that really lurks at the back of our minds, because there too, as Mohammed was mentioning in the case of Tunisia, there was a big debate after 2013. Was it a coup? Was it not a coup? And in fact, we do know that democracy and democratization, in fact, even the term democratization sort of implies some sort of linearity of a process, which simply jars with reality. And this is true, by the way, not just in countries that make the transition from one system to the other. I think it's equally true in countries that are and are considered to be established democracies. I mean, only think about this country. It's only becoming clear now that this is really not a world in which democracies simply stand on their pedestal and lecture non-democracies on how to embark upon a journey. But we're all on this journey, and it's a journey that is often made with sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, or perhaps 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards. And hence the difficulty in really understanding where you are in that journey. Is it a coup? Is it not a coup? Or is it just a sort of, growing pain of a democracy? And in all of this sort of understanding, what does leadership mean in this context? Because leadership is about change by definition. It's about steering change. It's also about connecting and mobilizing the public. But then it's also about ensuring that that public is not simply mobilized in the initial phases of a journey, but also that is brought along with you as you move along. So just let me sort of start off, Nizar, really by asking you about sort of, well, firstly, your experience of what leadership does mean in these kind of, in this roller coaster of ups and downs. And then we can perhaps sort of dive a little bit deeper into the digital dimension in all of this.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for this introduction. Actually, I will be sharing with you my own definition and what I learned from my both experience actually as partner at PwC, as being part of the global leadership team, working mainly for government and public services. PricewaterhouseCoopers is 300,000 employees. It's $45 billion. It's a very big firm working on out of 157 countries, etc. So we interact a lot with leaders all over the world and with governments. And I learned since I was a student is really when I go to any place, to any country, is to listen and to hear. So I had the chance. I visited 80 countries and I interacted a lot with leaders. I'm very happy about that. And then the other experience, as you correctly mentioned, is my experience as a finance minister in a wonderful country, really an amazing country. It was during a very tough period. Wonderful country because we are talking about 3,000 years of history. We are talking about hundreds of ruins of sites. We are talking about very nice climate. We are talking about a desert. We are talking about nice people. We are talking about forests. We are talking about lovely coast. And all of this in a very small piece of land located in the middle of the Mediterranean and North Africa, which is a gate also to Europe, right? So it's a very small piece of land, like less than 60,000 square miles, 167,000 square kilometers roughly. So for me, it's a concentration of beauty, this country, concentration of history, concentration of beauty. And then we, as you correctly said, we are in the middle of big transition. We are building in our own democracy and we are investing in our democracy. And it's not an easy exercise. Yes, few steps ahead, some steps back. And when I took responsibility, we had very tough economical situation. We thought that we had some growth. In reality, we discovered a few weeks later that we were really in recession, -2%. We had very tough pressure on the public finance, which was supposed to manage the entire. We had social tensions, and social tensions were coming mainly from the long period between the time we started the revolution till we took about the governance of the country, 10 years. 10 years is too much for people to get the dividends of democracy. And dividends of democracy cannot be only limited to freedom of press or freedom of expression. It should be much more than this. So, and during, of course, that process, I had to manage the benefits of 100 and SOEs, state-owned enterprises, the wages of 650,000 people. I mean, and more importantly, the big macro economic balance of a country. And we had to make a big move. It's not a speedboat. It's a very big ship that you have to change. And as you said, Mohammed, only 3 days or 4 days after we took the responsibility, we had our first COVID case. So all the plans that we've prepared to change, to make these structural changes, all of a sudden they changed also. And our number one priority came all of a sudden, became saving people's lives and fighting against the disease that we were discovering. We didn't know what's. We were discovering all of us this COVID. Yes. So And during, of course, that period, I had to interact a lot with the IMF. I had to interact a lot with other ministers, with president of the government, some presidents. So I interacted a lot with some leaders. And I wanted to give you today kind of summary of what I think what is leadership after interacting with all these wonderful people. And by the way, just last week, we met with a very important CEO, very great person. He's a CEO of a multi-billion US dollar company. He's a CEO, and he used to be a CEO of many important companies. And he shared with us some of his thoughts on what he did, but he also said, I did a lot, but I feel emptiness. I will share with you what does it mean to be a good leader. But I will share with you also how to avoid that feeling, that terrible feeling of emptiness once you reach your 60s or mid-60s and you look backward to your career. How to avoid that terrible feeling. So, of course, leadership is not a linear journey, as we said. It's not. Steps forward, steps backward, some backwinds, side winds. I mean, and of course, you have to manage all of this. But more importantly, for a leader, is the most important thing is to have a clear vision and to strongly believe in it, and to have a strategy that you can execute, and you strongly believe in it, and you communicate well with the people around, and you do it, especially during tough times where you have to take decisions. And once you have that level of confidence, just do it without hesitation. During tough times, no hesitation, just do it. Of course, this doesn't mean that you should not change whenever it's needed. You should keep listening. You should be able to change the direction whenever it's needed. And this is not contradicting with hesitation. Being able to get in this flexibility to change the direction and hesitation, or not hesitating, are not contradicting. So this is one aspect to answer to the question. But there is a second, which is beyond the borders of your vision and your mission as a leader, is to get the bigger picture all the time. It's not limited to your business. It's not limited to your country. It's not limited to your vision. You should go and look beyond this. Political leaders, you should understand what's happening. Fine. You should understand the geopolitics. You should understand these balances. United States, China, Europe, etc. What's happening in Africa, democracy, etc. The demographic evolution, what we call the resources mismatch. You will be leading, and hopefully you will be leaders during a period for our planet where you will have a major trend called the resources mismatch, and probably we can elaborate a little bit about it. And it's very important that you keep all of this in mind. What's the global picture? What's the bigger story? So this is, again, another important area. The third thing about leadership, it's about, for me, it's about sticking to values, especially during tough times. During tough times, you will be going through what we call a stress test. Your values will be stress tested. It's like what we do for banks. We stress test banks to make sure that they will remain solid whenever an important or shock is happening. We stress test aircrafts, new ones, cars, check them, good conditions, bad conditions, in a curve, rainy, blah, blah, blah. Is it still there? Is it running properly? And leadership is about stress testing also your values and how much you stick to it. And so you'll be, I hope so, once you become a leader. For some of them, I recognize some of the faces here, you're already leaders. But stress test is a test. So testing you. So we're taking you now for a couple of minutes forward in the future. And let's imagine that test. So the day by the day, you'll be going through that test. You say, hey, I listened to some of the advices and recommendations. What is it about? Leader, you have to think, you have to talk, you have to decide, you have to act, especially during tough periods. And there is an important ratio, which is the say-to-do ratio. You've heard about it? No? Say-to-do. So, and sometimes you don't have too much time to say. And sometimes the information is not 100% correct. And you need to understand it properly. This is requiring some competencies. As a leader, you are not supposed to know everything. You're not. But you are supposed to get the minimum competencies to understand what you are getting. And you are supposed also to have frameworks to get the rest of the information properly and correctly so that you can make the right decision. It's very important. By the way, I don't understand leaders, especially senior leaders, leaders who are running, politicians, running countries who do not understand the economy. How can you take, how can you make a decision? How can you lead a country with a vision without a minimum understanding of the economy? How can you lead? I cannot understand leader without a minimum finance background. What's the financial implication on the budget of what you are doing? And also, now as we are entering in a new, completely new era of full digital all over the place and technology, which is completely changing the shape of this world, changing the business models, changing the boundaries between industries, right? How can you, as a leader, do not understand these aspects and not taking them into account while you are recommending something you'd like to take us as a leader to another place? So this is why some competencies are very important for you, but you are not supposed to know everything. Now, going back to that ratio, say-to-do ratio, say-to-do ratio. There is another ratio, which is also very important, is do-to-achieve ratio. What's the point of doing and running and working and without progress and without concrete results? So how to be very results oriented during that period, right? Is that it, or is something else? There is something else, which is another ratio behind that, is achieve to adjust ratio. During tough periods, you'll be making mistakes. You'll be taking much more decisions in a tough period of time. I was obliged to take, for example, hundreds of decisions per week, believe me. And I knew that some of them should be adjusted. So you need to keep in mind that you need to adjust some of your decisions without hesitation. The same thing that you did for your vision and mission at high level, you do it on a daily basis for your decisions. And then to close the loop, once you adjust, you learn. So you do, you achieve, you adjust, you learn, you do, you achieve, you adjust, you learn. You see that process. And this is the process that you should be doing. So you're not supposed to know everything, but you should be doing that positive process so that you really bring everyone up. Now, having said all of this, there are two important things linked to leadership that I need to share with you, which is for me the most important ones. The first of these 2 points is about the people around you. Being leader is about involving them. It's about mobilizing them. It's about getting their buy-in. It's about sending positive messages, positive energy. A motivated people who's sharing the same mission as you is the best and the most powerful way to lead. It's about people. It's really about people. And the leader should understand clearly, and we all know, by the way, that there is a strong correlation between competencies and the added value of people, right? That's obvious. But what we tend to underestimate and to undervalue is actually the very strong correlation between both competency and added value. And that curve is really steep, really steep. It's like this for me. Competencies, added value. What does this mean? If you are here in the middle as a leader and you would like the team and individuals to add much more value, help them to grow, help them to be more competent, help them to achieve more. And this is saying also that there is a big difference between a medium person and competent person. You should know this. And it's up to the leader to help everyone grow in terms of competency, so it will increase much more in terms of value creation to the company, to the crew, to the team, to the nation, regardless. So this is one. But there is another one also, another curve, which is motivation to added value. Strong correlation, same story. The curve is very steep also. You add a little bit of motivation, you get significantly much more added value. And it's up to the leader to understand this. And ideally to combine both. And when you combine both, you'll get the maximum result. Now you may tell me why you spoke only about medium people and high people and etc. and talented people, etc. You're right, because quality, it's not only within those who got the opportunity. You are lucky to be here in Harvard Kennedy School. I'm lucky. I'm part of Harvard Kennedy School. Some of our other people are lucky because they got rich parents. Some others they are lucky because they got the kind of help from a friend, etc. So opportunities actually they are very much concentrated in some places, in some areas, in universities, in some regions, etc. But there are good people. They are all over the place. They are not only in Boston, but they are surrounding Boston. They are in other states, the United States. They are in Europe. They are in Asia. They are in Africa, in Latin America. They are all over the place. And those ones, they didn't get the chance to have that opportunity. So it's up to the leader to identify those and to help them get them this opportunity. And even though they think, or we think, they cannot do more, they don't have potential. Though I'm debating this, let's assume that. At least if you cannot, as a leader, to unleash his potential, at least unleash his passion. By unleashing the potential and the passion of all the people around you, this is when the magic happens. Last thing, probably I was a little bit too long, but and which is also another very important topic for me, which is about me, myself. A leader. What am I trying to achieve? Do you think what's the meaning? How to get a meaningful life for me? That's the ultimate purpose, right? Can we summarize? Or can we reduce the meaningful life to a good career? Is that it? Of course not. So this is why, going back to that example, the CEO that we met with last week, and he's saying, I'm a great leader, and probably by doing another role of CEO in another big company, he will not fill his emptiness. His emptiness can be filled only by things that you give to others. Only. So for me, to be a good leader is really about, it's about acknowledging that the heart of what we are doing resides within people. Leadership, this is for me, leadership is about serving others. It's an act of love.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I just really found it super inspiring myself, I must say, and as I'm sure everyone else. I mean, sort of listening to you, there are several thoughts that came to mind. I mean, firstly, there's this issue of sort of choice and taking responsibility for choices, being willing to adapt, and basically the role that, and you put your emphasis on the role that listening plays, which also I think connects to the reflections that you were making about people, and ensuring actually that you also surround yourself with people that perhaps precisely because they come from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, that have different competences, that have different experiences, and that have the courage to challenge you. Because of course, that's another big problem with leadership, that the higher up you go, the less likely it is that you're going to have people that have the courage, frankly speaking, to challenge you, and therefore to put you in that real listening conditioning, and therefore in that condition that really enables change and adaptation to take place. So in the cycle that you were describing, in a sense, people surrounding you are an essential component, because without them, you're not going to be able to do this basically on your own. And then the other reflection that sort of came to mind, particularly when you spoke about the risk of the emptiness and the importance of giving, and how, in a sense, one can really end up in this sort of bicycle-like situation, whereby you do have so many of these people that they literally have to keep on moving, because unless they keep on moving, if the bicycle stops, it risks falling. And the value in this respect of stopping at times, of stopping and of reflecting, and of really sort of understanding what is the real meaning behind what I'm doing, because it's very easy to get caught up in the washing machine, basically, of the day-to-day, and the importance that it gives you, because you're also busy. So really the importance at times and the humility of stopping. And I would say, sort of added to this, also the humility at times of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, putting yourself at times in the position of being a student once again, of not being at times in that position of leadership. I mean, you know, just and doing this with yourself now and then, and as you move along in the journey, at times it does become increasingly difficult to do that. And yet, how important is it to sort of rewind back and really understand the value of what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you summarized extremely well. I know we are talking about very tough topic it's about leadership in tough times, and you are not seeing my face. I want you to assume that I'm smiling. Okay. So it's very important. Sending these smiles, sending this positive energy to the people around you, like you correctly said. Yes, learning, being challenged, these are key things. Getting that humility to learn each and every moment, yes, it's very important. I'm a student, of course, Harvard Business School, just across the bridge. I'm very proud to say. And by the way, I'm with the brilliant other leaders. I'm learning from them. We are exchanging experience. And that's the beauty of it. And it's very important from time to time to check the level of your knowledge and to come back with your experience, to check it with the latest theories and progress. And I can tell you in some areas, 6 months after graduation, probably you are already outdated. That's the world that we live in now. So that regular process of getting challenged, being improved, improve yourself, etc., that's key. That's fundamental for me. And then I can tell you, and I was proud to do it. When I was finance minister, I invited many experts, and I took photos with them. And these photos were published on the official website of the ministry. And there were a strong reaction by Tunisians. Hey, we have a minister. He's not saying I'm the most smart. I'm not the smartest person on earth. And I can tell you, I'm not. I'm learning a lot from them. And I'm trying to stimulate them, to stimulate all the good energies, the intelligence of the country, to maximize the benefit for the country. And here we are touching another thing. The dilemma which is happening inside the leader. Actually, there are two agendas, usually not one. There is the agenda of the position that we are trying to do, to accomplish, right? The national agenda, for example, for political leaders. And there is the personal agenda. Usually one of them is here, the personal, the heart, and the other one is closer to the, let's say, to the brain. That journey, 20 centimeters or 30 centimeters, it's a very long journey. Probably it will be the longest journey in your career. How to get them aligned. And believe me, the best leaders in the world, those who kept their name in golden letters in history, are those who managed to forget about their own agenda and really focused on the global agenda, on the common purpose, etc. Probably during the short period of time following their actions, they got criticism, they got bad reaction, but ultimately, these are those who made the biggest impact, and these are those who we do remember. So that journey is very important.
And before we open up, let me just touch on the digital theme, because, you know, in a sense, we've spoken around it, because we've spoken about tools and instruments that are used. We've spoken about speed a lot, and of course, a big, digital plays an important role in this. What is the potential, but then also what are the risks that are involved when we look at the nexus between digital and leadership?
Leadership for me is creating completely new area. We are still learning and developing this. The speed of change thanks to digital was multiplied by factor X that we cannot even measure. It's not now. It's in all industries. It's in all the places. It's changing the boundaries, as we said, and it's given to the leaders new ways of governance. Thanks to digital, we can have a better governance, and therefore we can be better. And examples are so many in so many projects. In all the steps of the process, collecting data, we have big added value. Decision making, AI, we can storing data, blockchain, etc. Other examples. Communicating with people, engaging them, etc. Structuring workflows, ERPs, etc. Protecting. And then the risk, the other side, is that when we rely more and more on digital, this meaning more and more on data, of course, there is the big risks of cybersecurity and the big risk of trust, etc. Trust for me is a major challenge that we will be facing when we talk about digital.
So let me open this up for questions, curiosities. Absolutely, back there.
Yeah.
And please tell us your name.
Of course, yes. So my name is Nizar. I'm from Tunisia and I'm MPP student here. Thank you so much for both of you for this conversation. And I guess I wanted to ask a question that grounds the conversation more into your experience being a finance minister in Tunisia at a critical moment. So sort of grounding it more into the specific area of your experience. And I wanted to ask about, I guess, the IMF negotiations that were happening at the time. And also, I mean, now a lot of us are learning sort of about negotiation and how much one has sort of weights at the table. And I was wondering, I mean, for a country like Tunisia, how much weight is there in negotiating with international financial institutions, and how, I guess, just if you could tell us a bit more insights about what happens at the table and at that specific moment in 2020.
Okay, you want me to disclose some important information?
As a learning guy.
I will not. But I can share with you some thoughts, etc., about negotiating with the IMF, which is a very important institution, with the World Bank also, and with many others, but more specifically with the IMF. The IMF is very important overall, including for Tunisia, because not only for a direct deal, but it also will open for us the capital market, and we can go and we can borrow. So it's once we have the agreement with the IMF, it's opening something else. Regarding the discussion with the IMF, we had two programs before. And when we took the responsibility, we were at the end of the second program. There were technically 3 weeks left before the end of that program. And so what we did is actually there were a couple of $250 million remaining as part of the last deal. And what we managed to do is to change to another program called RFI. So this is probably a little bit technical, but the overall discussion with the IMF is not easy, I would say. Definitely not. I personally, and what we did after these 2 programs is that we went through an evaluation of the last 2 programs. And this is exercise we went through together with the IMF. And we didn't want to engage immediately a 3rd program without understanding and getting some lessons from the past. That step was very important. And we came up with some lessons learned. I will mention 2 of them. The first one is that during the past programs with the IMF, we didn't focus enough on the economical growth and on the social aspects. We focused much more on the monetary strategy and other stuff. So economy and social, they weren't really inside the program. This is for me the first lesson. And we said, this is why the next program should reflect much more what we are supposed to do from on the economical side and on the social side. The second lesson, much more important, is that any program that should be approved by both sides should come first from Tunisia, from the Tunisian government. It should reflect the Tunisian strategy, the Tunisian vision. It should come from there. It should not be built in a different way. And once you have it, and once you confirm that this strategy is the right one, and that this strategy will ensure that we will reach the macroeconomical balance, then I'm sure that it will be approved by all parties, by the IMF, by the different political parties, by UGTT, which is the labor union in Tunisia, and by UTICA. We have a former president here. Very happy to see her, so all of this. So once you reach that, and you do that step, and when I went through that exercise with them, believe me, it were very long and very tough. I will not go into the details, but sometimes we finished 11 p.m. negotiating, and I had to wake up 3 o'clock in the next morning just to continue to be on time. So it was very important for us. And during that exercise, I really saw that there is a possibility to get this alignment of planets within Tunisia and outside Tunisia with a concrete program. So we could have reached another agreement if our government would have stayed into the country, but unfortunately it didn't happen. And you know, once you start changing governments quite often, and this is not only valid for Tunisia, it's all over the place, you are killing the process of economical growth. You are killing it. Bringing new team, new people. By the time they understand what's happening, they understand the system, they take actions, they achieve results, they show results. It's a matter of years and years.
But just to follow up on this, I mean, on the sort of 2 points that you raise, I mean, this sort of greater emphasis on the socioeconomic side of the equation, and the, in a sense, sort of change of a method towards a more bottom-up, from Tunisia upwards, which obviously would apply to any other country as well, negotiating with the IMF. Did you feel that there was greater responsiveness in the IMF than there would have been in the past? Also because of the change in the broader international context. In a sense, we're exiting the era of, sort of hyper-liberalism or libertarianism and there's greater attention being paid, indeed, to perhaps not as much in the practice yet, but at least in the theory, to the socioeconomic side of the equation. So did you feel that there was greater responsiveness, although it was still a very tough negotiation?
The short answer is definitely yes, because one of the lessons that we took from the previous programs is definitely this one, paying more attention to economical growth, paying more attention to the social dimension. And this is why we also did some high level orally, but it wasn't written, is that any structural changes, we should not front load big social actions which have big social. And personally, in addition to the negotiation with the IMF, my school of thought, I can share it with you in a very transparent way. Yes, there are talks about liberalism and negotiation with them. Usually we tend to go into that direction. But the feedback that I received is that as long as you come up with a very solid plan that you believe in, and that you can confirm that you reach the macroeconomic balance, then do it. And once they got the trust that you are able to do it, then you reach an agreement. And by the way, 1 week after I left, the first time the IMF sent an official letter to the country to thank the Minister of Finance with arguments 1, 2, 3. So we were able to reach. We could have done. But I'm also against this politic of going and borrowing money, especially from outside. So we took, in parallel to the negotiation with the IMF, a firm commitment, which was announced to the population, that we will not exceed 60% of external debt reported to GDP. And we were about to do it. This is point number 2. Point number 3, and this is also this is what I personally believe in. We live in a world where the financial logic is all over the place. It's dominating everything else. It's even dominating labor, it's dominating economy, it's dominating the value creation, dominating the fact that we are taking risk, etc. And this is why, when I told you a good leader is about having a purpose and asking yourself on a regular basis, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of what I'm doing? The purpose of each and every leader, according to me, should not be limited to a financial purpose. So probably I see some faces smiling. Finance minister is saying that it should not be. It should not be. There is something else much bigger than the pure financial purpose. I'm not saying no to financial purpose. Financial purpose, but clearly something else.
Randy, and then Ash.
Thank you very much. My name is Randy. I'm French Tunisian. I'm in the Master in Public Administration in International Development here at the school, among men for a master's. My question is, if we look back at the 10 years of what happened in Tunisia, I mean, debt to GDP went from 40% to 90%. The dinar got depreciated. The public deficit is huge. But at the same time, we don't see that the social safety net got better. The pension system is in a very difficult situation, and the employment of the youth is above 40% right now. My question is, what went wrong in those 10 years? And what is missing in Tunisia, I guess, to implement the tough reforms that the country needs right now?
Oh, tough question. That's $1 million question. It's a long list of things that went wrong. And summarizing it in 1 or 2 sentences would be wrong. First of all, these 10 years, it's probably too long for us. But compared to the time scale of a nation, it's still a short period of time. I'm not trying to say it's not. It is important. But it's part of also building a democracy. It's never linear. We said for leadership, it's not linear. Building a democracy usually it's not. I admit that it's really costly, especially for our generation, was building that democracy. So one way to look at it, it's a huge cost, social cost, etc. Mainly social cost. On the other side, I still consider it as an investment in the future. if you think about 2050, 2060 for our kids and the kids of our kids, etc., it's still a very good move, and that's the right way forward. Now, so what went wrong? Let's say it's partially wrong. We lost only a battle, but it's not the war. We are on the right track. What went wrong is a long list of things till now. Problem of leadership, clearly. And I said earlier, we need leaders who understand economy. I'm sorry to say, doing politics without understanding economy, there's something wrong. Public finance also. Understanding the world, and digital, etc. So this is very important. We had a problem of leaders. I think also we were focusing too much on building institutions, on trying to build and focusing on processes, etc. And we forget that what the people were waiting for is something else. Also, when we build a democracy, it's not alone. There are markets. And markets by nature, by DNA, they tend to expand, and to take something else. And we saw, unfortunately, that there. So kind of strange alliance between markets and some key positions in the state. And there is a fight that needs to be done, is that really we take the state and the decision makers from far away from the markets. Because many people understood that the important points, when you have power, you can easily monetize it. And here we go back to the values. Here we link back to this test that I mentioned, to sticking to values, understanding what is really important, what's less important, what's clean, what's not clean. I'm sorry, some certain things, it's not black and white. For these kind of things, it is black. It's clean, it's not clean. And then there are other things that we can add to the list. But probably for me, these are the main things. But I don't want you, as Tunisian, and I see some Tunisian faces here, is that you believe that we are overall, we are wrong. Ultimately, that's the good thing. We need democracy. And we need a real democracy. We don't need a fake democracy. And we are building currently that democracy.
Question there.
Thank you. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for your view on leadership and leadership in crisis. My name is Noha. I am from Ethiopia. I am also a mid-care public administration master's student. So my question is, I have two questions. The first question is in relation to heart and brain, the journey. So from your experience, particularly by the time of COVID, do you remember those challenging decisions where you had to make decisions using your brain and your heart, and that was not even convincing? And my second question is, you highlighted the importance of competency as well as motivation in the public service and public space. And that's the most critical aspect that public service in most parts of Africa are missing. So how did you actually confront those challenges while you're also facing the challenge with COVID?
Okay, competencies, COVID and competencies. Yes, during the COVID, for us, it was extremely clear after the second week. First week, we still have our plans. We were about to start them. Second week, 7 days later, we decided that priority number one is saving lives. 6 months later, we had only 87 deaths in Tunisia, a country of 12 million, ranked among top 3 or top 10, depending on the worldwide. This was our strategy, and we worked extremely hard, and probably we didn't communicate enough how hard we worked so that we reached that number. We utilized digital. We tracked each and every case. We saw who was in contact with a lot of work being done. So once you clarify your priorities, then it was done. For me, it was tough, to be honest, because we are shifting in terms of priority. We are delaying somehow the structural changes, that big move, the big vote that I talked about. We had to support companies who were suffering. So we had to come up with a long list of measures, and we came up within 3 weeks of long list of measures. The total cost of them was approximately 2% of our GDP, pretty high for a country our size. We were going for a budget deficit of 5% roughly, and I knew that it would be much bigger than that because of recession. Before the COVID, we locked down the entire country because extra expenses cost, like the social aid, like what we did for companies, because also of our way of calculating. We are not using till now, unfortunately, the international standards for public accounting. And I said that during the very first speech that I did in the parliament. I'm sorry, we need to utilize international standards to understand what's behind the numbers. I need to see the numbers, the correct numbers, to make judgment. And I did partially, not fully, the full exercise of IPSAS, what we call the international standards. So we needed that. So it was really tough, and we had to make trade-offs. And the leader, usually in tough decisions, usually there are two things. In addition to things, it's a very long list for you today. Sorry to add, but there are two other things. The first one is about managing decision between what is important versus what is urgent. During tough periods and crises, we tend to focus only on what is urgent, and we forget what is important. Right? You agree on that? Yes. So keep this in mind. It's very important that you have this in mind. The second thing is usually when it's about taking decisions, and it's probably the technical topic that the team brought to you is not necessarily complete or correct, but you still need to make a decision. Then it's up to you to have your own filter. And this is why, again, you need competencies. And then when you reach the decision, most of the decisions that I was facing was between a tough option and a tougher option. It was between a good option and a bad option. It was between tough option and tougher options, and both of them will have a bad reaction of the public. But the good news that I saw personally for Tunisia and with the Tunisian people, that they understood clearly who was really working hard and taking the right decision for the country versus the others. People understand that. They understand how authentic is the leader, how true is he? Is he really saying the truth or not? They do understand this, and they keep this in mind. And Tunisians are very good. Your second question about competencies in the administration and how to involve them. I wasn't acting really as a minister full time. I was minister. I was also a friend. I was also project manager, digital project manager, IT project manager. I was visiting them on a regular basis to their offices, discussing with them, mobilizing them, etc. And I was trying to convey that positive energy every time. I didn't change anyone from the previous team, of the previous finance minister. And I gave them trust by default. And I told them, all of them, including the cabinet, you have my trust by default. Just show me what you can do, and you will stay. I didn't change anyone, except probably one or two later on after a big mistake. And that kind of spirit went on, because at the beginning, of course, someone coming from the private sector, he spent some time in Tunisia, but he spent a lot of time outside Tunisia, etc. His mind is probably not exactly the same as ours, which is a normal, natural thing. But believe me, after a week, this is partially gone. 2 weeks later, it's gone. It's gone.
Okay, I've got two final questions.
Okay, my final question is quick. You mentioned like the cycle of leadership.
name again?
My name is Rose.
Okay, hi.
And I'm not Tunisian, but I've been to Tunisia. I really liked it. Yeah. You mentioned the cycle of leadership starting off with say and do and achieve, and I think it might actually go back to say. And I wanted to ask you about the communications aspect of how you communicate what you are able to achieve to the populace. And you also mentioned how politically active the average Tunisian is, and how tuned in they are to what the government's doing. How do you communicate what you've been able to achieve to the average person?
Good question. Thank you, Rose, for it's managing the political communication is a tricky part. It depends a lot on who's the leader, which position, etc. President of the government should have a certain style, should have kind of pace, should select well the media, should select well the messages, etc. And then depending on which minister and which role within the government, of course, the role differ. Personally, I was communicating on a regular basis, but not for me, but as a team. So I was trying to push my direct reports to go to the media, to communicate, and to show that they are really there. I was trying to achieve two objectives. The first one, I didn't want to be the central person of what the ministry is doing. And wanted to put them and to say to the entire country that these are the guys who are working on these topics. And of course, my second objective goes beyond that period, is that I knew that I'm leaving after weeks, after months, etc. But these guys will stay, or most of them will stay. So I wanted to ensure that once I leave, and because they spoke in front of the population, and they presented their some projects and topics, they feel much more engaged, and these things will continue. And this is what, by the way, if you go back to big conference press that I did end of July, I was thinking, am I going to stay? I'm not, probably July 2020. What I did, long press conference, we presented 6 concrete digital solutions, live, in front of journalists, live, new ones, to show that it's possible to achieve and to do concrete digital projects in Tunisia in a short period of time. And I asked my direct reports to present the solution. And this is what was done. So I invite you to go back to that press conference and to see achievement presented by the administration and not presented by the minister himself.
Let me just highlight how important I actually think this is. Also connecting it back to the other discussion that we were having, which was really about complexity and trade-offs. I mean, often, the difficulty with communication is that, one thing is to communicate simplicity and, sort of a one-shot game, right? Quite another thing is communicating complexity. And communicating complexity, I think, is something that one person alone cannot do. It really does require a sort of comprehensive effort. And so it requires lots of people engaged for a long time. And so simply to highlight how important this is, but unfortunately, how rare it is for a minister to adopt this approach. I mean, I kind of have hardly ever heard this before. so it's really quite amazing. Final question.
So I have 2 questions actually. The first one is, you said, my name is Khansa, I'm a visiting fellow at the Center of Middle Eastern Studies at Harvard. And I wanted to ask you, but you said that every leader need, as Minister of Finance, you needed a big picture. So what was your big picture? What are the reforms and policies that you were able to put in place? But more importantly, what was the reform that you could not put in place? And the second question was about the relation with the EU, as you talked about debt and how it burdened Tunisia's economy. And I wanted to ask, as the European Union is as a European Union is one of the most important lenders to Tunisia, but also the countries in the European Union are in the top 5 of the most important lenders. I think it's France, Italy, Germany are in the top 5. And it works kind of like the IMF. So many loans are assorted with conditionality. So how was also the negotiation, and it has also a specific relation to Tunisia as it is its neighbor. So how was also the negotiation with the European Union?
We need an extra hour for these two questions, but I will go quickly. Having the bigger picture again is mandatory, especially when you're Minister of Finance or when you are a minister, full stop, or when you're President of the government. Definitely. You are negotiating with these parties, you are meeting with ambassadors, you are discussing with the international donors, you are talking with the markets. You have to anticipate, you have to have your own reading what's going on, how things are going, how things are evolving for the barrel price, for the labor, for all these components, and you have to understand the logic. We were supposed to make decisions about the barrel price. It went down. This was, by the way, the only good news during that period. And thanks to that, we saved probably 500 or 600 million Tunisian dinars, roughly 200 million US dollars. But we had to take a decision: should we regarding the barrel, should we hedge or not? So these kind of things, it's up to make the right decision. And luckily, we made the right decision for hedging. And without understanding what's going on around you, you will make bad decisions. We saved 50 or 60 million Tunisian dinar. I've never said this, by the way. I wasn't always going to the media and saying, we did this, we achieved that. That's the wrong way to communicate. So having this, understanding these global balances and what's happening in geopolitics is very important. Your second question regarding our relationship with the EU, it was, and as far as I know, it's still in a very good relationship, both with the EU ambassador, EU as a whole, but also with our close neighbors, Italy, France, Spain, Germany. I was meeting with them. UK also, I was meeting on a regular basis with these ambassadors. Yes, when we reach agreements, usually we put gate and conditions within each gate. That's the standard. And we kept on doing it. And I hope, frankly speaking, that one day, if we do properly our work, our homework as Tunisians, we will not need any more of these kind of gates. It's up to us to define them for us, to our benefits. And this is going back again to our strategy, to our vision that should be put in agreement and should not come from outside. The solution, there is no idea, there is no one size fits all in terms of strategy. And the best solutions are the solutions that are built and proposed and implemented by Tunisia for Tunisia.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think in a sense, the success of conditionality is in making conditionality unnecessary. and that's really the aim of the exercise. So Nizar, I think this has really been a wonderful opportunity. I mean, I kind of wanted really to go a little bit over time because we started a little bit late, but above all, it was such a fascinating talk. I mean, it's really been a conversation which has taken us from the theory to the practice through the personal journey, and above all, from the head to the heart, which is the most important part of it all. So really, a very warm thanks from myself, and I think from all of us for this wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pesci, for your time. Thank you for being here.